The air in the Crenshaw district felt heavy that afternoon, not just with the smog of the city, but with an unseen tension that precedes the irreversible. The air in the Crenshaw district felt heavy that afternoon, not just with the smog of the city, but with an unseen tension that precedes the irreversible. It was March 31st, 2019. On a boulevard that symbolized more than just commerce. It was a gathering point, a testament to success. Built brick by painful brick, Orion Watts, known locally as a quiet man, a pillar who had traded the dangerous streets for genuine influence, stood outside his small clothing store, the Marathon Collective. He was talking, hands moving with the familiar rhythm of vision and strategy, when the old sedan, scarred and anonymous, pulled up to the curb. Inside the car, waiting for a signal only he understood, was Silas Vance, a younger man known to few, but known well to the street's intricate, unforgiving code. Silas carried a history of resentment, a toxic mix of perceived disrespect and a slow-burning jealousy that had been nurtured in the shadows of Orion's ascent. The brief, tense exchange between Orion and Silas was quick, a moral check, a quiet challenge to a self-destructive path. The kind of conversation that happens 1,000 times a day in any neighborhood, trying to pull itself out of darkness. But this time it was different. This time, the confrontation was not diffused. It was ignited. The narration must slow here, focusing on the details. The casual ease with which Orion spoke. The cold, almost vacant look in Silas's eyes. A witness, Alton Carter, saw it all from the corner of the parking lot, his body momentarily frozen by the unfolding dread. He was a man who lived by the rule of the street. See nothing, say nothing, survive. The first shots shattered the quiet confidence of the afternoon, echoing down the long, familiar street. 3 quick, violent cracks. Then a pause. Tintu, more. Orion collapsed onto the cracked asphalt, the life draining out of him in real time. Silas, in a moment of pure, panicked adrenaline, looked directly at Alton across the lot, their eyes locking for a fraction of a second that would define the rest of their lives. It was an involuntary, silent contract, witnessed and murderer, signed in blood and fear. Silas fled in the waiting sedan, disappearing into the traffic and the anonymity of the wide Los Angeles grid, leaving behind chaos and an unbearable, immediate void. Alton, instead of running, found himself paralyzed, his feet glued to the pavement, watching the scene devolve into a nightmare of sirens and screaming. The psychological toll of that split-second eye contact was immediate. Silas knew he was seen, and Alton knew he was marked. Homicide detective Lena Wells arrived an hour later, stepping out of her unmarked unit and into the brutal reality of the crime scene. Wells was a veteran, sharp, pragmatic, and rarely swayed by the emotional theatrics of the job. But this case was different. Orion Watts was not just a victim, he was a symbol of hope, a man who had earned his respect the hardest way possible. Wells felt the collective weight of the community's sorrow and anger. Her investigation began with the painstaking, tedious work of building a timeline, tracing the movements of the sedan and reviewing the shaky, inconclusive surveillance footage. They quickly identified Silas Vance through old records and neighborhood tips. But identifying the killer was only the beginning. They needed the witness, the one who saw the why, the one who could bridge the gap between motive and execution. The pressure from the local authorities was immediate and intense. They needed an arrest that would satisfy the public demand for swift justice. Wells, however, was wary of rushing the narrative. She knew the street had its own codes, and she knew the witness, if there was one, would be buried under layers of fear. Alton Carter returned to his small apartment that night. He was not a violent man, just a man trying to survive. But the weight of the secret was crushing. He paced the worn carpet, the image of Silas's cold eyes and the sound of the gunshots playing on an endless loop in his mind. He was caught in an impossible vice. Speak up and face the brutal retribution of the street, or remain silent and carry the guilt of allowing a cold-blooded killer to walk free. His hands trembled as he poured a glass of water. The internal monologue was deafening. Orion deserved justice, but what about my life? What about my family? The moral conflict was agonizing, transforming the act of silence from self-preservation into a betrayal. Orion respected him. The idea of letting his murder be just another unsolved crime was intolerable, yet the danger was palpable. Detective Wells' team finally found Alton 2 days later through an anonymous tip that only gave them a general description of his car and his usual routes. She found him at a small, greasy spoon diner on the edge of the district. The scene was deliberately understated. Wells, in a suit, sitting across from Alton, who looked frail and cornered, nursing a black coffee he couldn't drink. The silence was thick, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware in the background. Wells spoke first, her voice calm, measured, professional. She didn't accuse. She described the crime, the victim, the loss to the community, building the moral argument before she ever mentioned Silas's name. Alton kept his eyes fixed on the coffee cup, his posture coiled and defensive. "I didn't see anything, Detective," he finally managed, his voice a dry whisper that betrayed his internal conflict. Wells leaned forward, not aggressively, but with the weight of an unshakable truth. "Mr. Carter, Silas Vance knows you saw him. He saw you. You think silence protects you? Silence only buys him time." This was the turning point. The acknowledgement of the shared, terrifying knowledge. She wasn't just asking for testimony. She was offering him a path out of an impossible moral labyrinth. The rest of the interrogation was a slow, controlled dismantling of Alton's fear. Wells didn't push him with aggressive tactics, but with the unyielding gravity of the situation. She talked about accountability, not just for the killer, but for the community. She pointed out that Orion Watts dedicated his life to breaking the very cycle of fear and silence that now threatened to consume Alton. The emotional conflict escalated with every minute. Alton's hands were visibly shaking. He swallowed hard, his throat tight with unspoken words. Finally, a single tear tracked a path through the grime on his cheek. He looked up, his eyes meeting Wells's for the first time. The confession wasn't a burst of relief. It was a painful, drawn-out exhalation of air. He recounted the event, detailing the weapon, the car, the chilling, brief eye contact. He confirmed the cold motive, the petty, toxic jealousy over Orion's success and respect. Wells listened, taking precise notes, confirming every detail. The statement was signed, notarized, and secured. Alton had made his choice not for safety, but for a higher form of justice, trading one kind of danger for another. The legal drama that followed was long and brutal. Silas Vance's defense team tried to paint Alton as an unreliable narrator, a troubled man coerced by the police. But Alton's testimony, delivered with quiet, unshakable certainty, was devastating. He described the look in Silas's eyes, as if he were looking at the man now. The details of the car, the specific manner in which Orion fell. It was the testimony of a man who had faced the ultimate moral test and, despite his fear, chose truth. The moral core of the case was laid bare for the jury. A tragedy fueled by bitter resentment and a community's struggle against the paralyzing silence of fear. The jury ultimately returned a verdict of guilty. Silas Vance was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Alton Carter was placed in a protection program, his life forever changed, forever looking over his shoulder, yet carrying a profound, quiet relief. The case, though closed, remains a stark, painful lesson in the destructive power of envy and the immense moral courage it takes to break the code of silence. Justice was served, but at an astronomical personal cost paid by the witness who chose to live with the fear of the truth rather than the certainty of guilt. Sometimes, one wrong choice can destroy a lifetime. Learn from their story. Choose kindness. Choose life. This was just the beginning. The most mysterious and shocking crime stories are still ahead. Subscribe to Crime Flow Narratives and be among the first to uncover what comes next.